I am Ray, and I held on to resentment for years. Until one day I finally saw the truth, that I was doing nothing but poisoning myself. And look, I get it. I'm sure you were wronged, and you have every reason to be angry. But the fact is that if you hold on to resentment, if you keep doing this, if you continue living this way, well, it's like gripping a hot coal and expecting the other person to get burned. It does nothing but hurt you. But here is what nobody tells you. Letting go isn't about forgiving and forgetting. It's about taking your power back. And today I'm going to share with you exactly how I did that, so you can finally break free from this burden of resentment and live a life of peace, clarity, and true inner harmony. Now, all resentment comes from ego. What is ego? Ego is personal identity. What is personal identity? Memory, sense data. So we go through experiences. Information is received through the senses, and then that memory is stored somewhere in our body. And over time, we continue to feed that memory with our emotions, with our thoughts, and that creates a construct of identity. And our ego, you could say, it's like the group of all our different identities that make up the person we believe ourselves to be. And the more attached we are to our ego identity, the stronger our resentment will be. Here is one example. Let's say you have an identity about being a good friend. You try really hard to be a good friend for others. This is your identity. You go out of your way to help people. You try and do nice things, favors, things like that. But then, somebody doesn't match your expectations because you try to be a good friend. You expect others to be a good friend also. And so you have all of these ideas of what a good friend is. For instance, answering the phone, helping, spending time together. And so the kinds of things that happen when you have a strong attachment to a certain identity, when another person doesn't match your expectations, you get resentful. And it all happens one baby step at a time. For instance, you call your friend and they don't answer. The first time, not a big deal, happens. Second time, okay, this is fine still. Third time, I don't know what's going on. Maybe they don't like me anymore. And so after not answering the phone enough times, you would begin to judge that person and say, they are not being a good friend to me. And now because you would believe that they're not being a good friend, that is where the resentment arises. Or for instance, if you ask them to help you and they say, no, I'm busy. I can't help you right now. And then you ask them 2 or 3 more times. And each time they say no. And so you assume, well, they're not a good friend. Or if your friend is always busy and you keep asking them to hang out and they say, no, I'm busy, then again, you assume that they're not being a good friend. But you never once considered that, wait a minute, maybe the energy I'm giving off is part of the reason this person is acting a certain way toward me. This is a bit of an example of what I experienced. So for a long time, I had one of my best friends, and we would hang out and stuff like that. But he was one of those guys who always wanted my attention. Wanted to hang out, wanted to do this, wanted to do that. And one thing he would do is he would call my phone 3, 4, 5, 6 times a day. And he would do this with other people as well. And when you have somebody calling your phone that much, eventually you say, I'm just not going to pick up the phone. So you just watch it go to voicemail. And eventually that would upset him. Now I'm assuming he had this identity because that is what my intuition tells me. And one day we were hanging out late at night and at the time I was trying to eat healthy. And he brought out this bag of chocolates. And he said, do you want a chocolate? And I said, no. And then he kept pushing the issue for like another minute or 2. And I had to keep telling him no over and over again. And by the final time I said no, there was a bit of aggression in my voice, assertiveness. And he told me, hey man, I was just trying to be a good friend. In his mind, he believed that giving chocolates was being a good friend. It's just a made-up idea, but that is the kind of things people believe. The point of it is that resentment only arises when people don't match your expectations of how you think they should behave. And those expectations are rooted in your ego identity. Whatever particular identity you have attached yourself to. And so, resentment is your spiritual teacher because it reveals to you something in your unconscious, an attachment that is secretly ruining your life. Because what it does, this attachment, it causes the negative emotions, the resentment, the anger. It allows this to fester in your body. And this is very powerful, destructive energy. And so what it does, it goes inward and wreaks havoc on your insides, on your mental health. So you get sick. You might develop some kind of illness. What you see, people who struggle with anger, they have heart problems. Because when energy doesn't have a proper channel, it becomes destructive. So we have to learn how to release this energy and channel it in the proper ways. Now let's take the example of betrayal. In truth, there is no such thing as betrayal. It doesn't exist. Because what happens is that here a person is, and here you are. And this person behaves in a way that you perceive as betrayal. And so you get resentful toward that person. And you hold on to that resentment forever. But the fact was that this person was always the way they were. You just had an imaginary idea of who you thought they were. So what happened is that the person you believed them to be was not real. It was a thought. It was an idea in your imagination. It was an assumption. And so it was nothing other than you were living in ignorance. Ignorance of the truth. And ignorance is also darkness. And so what happened was that when the light of truth was made manifest, that darkness was dissolved. But because you were attached to that darkness, you got burned. And so it was not the person that betrayed you. It was your own thoughts that betrayed you. For no other reason than because we were living in ignorance and we were attached too strongly to an ego identity. Now, the solution to avoid these problems in relationships is communication. Because only through communication can both parties come to the truth. But what happens? People avoid having difficult conversations. So this person does something that bothers you, and you don't say anything about it. And you let that resentment fester. And it builds up and it builds up and it boils until one day you explode and attack that other person. And all the things you should have said come out at once in this violent verbal attack. And so you burn the other person because you feel burned. You feel hurt, and so you hurt the other person. But it was unfair because you did not communicate to that person. You were not open and honest about how you felt, about how you thought. And so what happens? We are never angry with others. We are angry at ourselves, and we project that anger onto everybody else, or whoever the target is. We are angry at ourselves for being ignorant, for not knowing better. But the thing is, you could have not known any better, because if you would have known better, you would have done something different. You see, very rarely is it about forgiving others. And almost always, it is about forgiving ourselves for not knowing better. And we don't do this in a cynical way, like, oh, I knew I shouldn't have trusted that person. I knew it. No. You forgive yourself because imperfection is the nature of life in this human body. Of course we're ignorant. Of course there are an infinite array of different things we don't know. Hindsight is always 20/20. And the thing is, resentment doesn't actually do anything. We cannot change the past. So what happens? We ruminate on the past. about all the ways we were wronged, about all the people who did bad things to us. But what does it do? It does nothing but ruin your present moment. So we ruin our future because we ruin our present moment by reflecting on the wrongs done in the past. And so you have to ask yourself, do you actually want to live a good life? Or do you want to just wallow in your suffering? Nothing else matters. Because the fact is that you cannot put a fire out by pouring more gasoline on top of it. You cannot fix a negative situation by ruminating on more negativity. So it doesn't matter what happened. It doesn't matter who did what. The only thing that matters is, do you want to live a good life moving forward? Make that decision right now. Yes or no. And it's okay if the answer is no. We're not always ready to let go. Because right here, it's not even about forgiveness. It's not even about letting go. The true question is whether or not you want to continue wallowing in suffering. That is the only question we have to answer. Because with my friend, for instance, he has held on to resentment for decades. And he remains stuck in this hell. Never satisfied, rarely ever happy. Always angry. Always drowning his sorrows. Because he has not made this decision. And we have to understand the ego, this aspect of you, does not want to let go. Because it feeds off the resentment. It feeds off the anger. And it needs your resentment to survive. Because through your anger and resentment, it feeds that identity. Whatever it is. And that identity is who you believe you are. But it is not who you are. Your identity is a thought believed in. Just as in the case with other people, it's an imaginary thought who they are. So too is your own identity an imaginary thought. Except for we just know ourselves a little bit better. This ego is not the true nature of what you are. What you are is far greater than you could have ever imagined. And this ego, this resentment is keeping you from experiencing heaven. The ego is like a dark cloud covering the light and the warmth of the sun. And so the earth gets shrouded in darkness and it's cold. But once we can let go of this attachment by making the decision to live a better life, the sun shines forth once again and brings heaven on earth. Why is this? Your true nature as the self, which is also the divine essence of God. You could call it your soul. Its name is consciousness. And its true nature, if the self was the sun, its radiance is peace, love, joy, and abundance. You may not believe it, but this is the natural state of being for all beings. But the ego creates the sense of separation. And so like the cloud, it blocks out the natural radiance of what we are. You see, it's not the resentment that we have to let go of. It's attachment. And you see, all those who are on the spiritual path, they seek freedom. And so for the spiritual individual, the ego attachment is like a gold mine. It reveals where we are still blocked, the things that are keeping us from what we truly desire in life. Forget all the material things you think you want. Everything you could have ever desired is already yours. And this is what separates you from it. Think of our soul, you could say, like a balloon. Here's your soul, like a balloon. It naturally rises toward heaven, which is why they say, well, everything that you desire in life, everything that you seek is actively seeking you, because it is. You naturally rise to higher states of being without any effort. Of course, not believable by anybody trapped in the ego. Why? Because the ego is conditioning. It is like earthliness covering the balloon, dirt and mud and stuff. And so what happens? Instead of the balloon rising naturally, it begins to fall naturally. And to the degree in which we are covered with earthliness, mud, dirt, conditioning, the lower we grow towards hell and the more we suffer, which is why the more attached you are to ego, the more pain, the more suffering, the more problems you will experience. But resentment allows you to expose those ego attachments. And so you have a choice. Do you want to continue feeding those attachments, or would you like to let them go? Because there is a beautiful life waiting for you, whenever you like, but you must seek before you can find. And if you have no desire to make life better, well, that is how you can stay stuck forever. But it's not necessary. But the problem is that when we're in a negative state of being, when we're down here, our entire reality is filtered through a negative lens. So everything we see in life is negative. But it is not true. Our reality is simply being filtered by a temporary emotional state. And so when you're really low, you don't want to let go of the resentment because it almost feels good. It feels powerful. The anger is power. It is fire. So what we must do is that if we want to let go of this resentment naturally, we have to start stepping a bit upward. This is counterintuitive because you might think, well, to let go of resentment, I have to forgive. But while you're in these lower states, you don't want to forgive. You don't care. You may know the truth and you don't care about it. But as you start rising to higher states of being, forgiveness is natural. It's easy. You don't have to try. Because if you're right here and resentment comes, you feel yourself drop and the suffering that you experience is unbearable. It's not tolerable. But if you're down here, well, the resentment, it may make you feel even more powerful. Maybe you feel temporarily a bit better. So instead of thinking, I have to forgive this person, I have to let go. Yes, this will happen in time, but don't pay attention to this for now. Because if you are in an extremely negative state, you don't care about these things. Let's get out the frequency chart. And so instead of feeling like you have to do these things, I have to forgive, I have to let go, when you don't want to, the way I will show you how to truly let go of resentment is effortless. At least, kind of. What I mean is, instead of forcing yourself to forgive, to let go, when it's not authentic, when you don't truly mean it, we want to forgive and let go, and it be a natural process. Effortless. Now, I don't necessarily agree with how these are placed, but it's a great example. So essentially, this is the scale of frequency. And each emotion has its particular frequency. So the more shame, the more guilt, the more apathy, grief, fear you feel, the lower you are and the closer you are to hell. And as you rise in frequency, you grow closer to heaven. Enlightenment, peace, joy, love. But the problem is that you can't be in shame and then suddenly jump to acceptance because you're in a negative state. Acceptance is, it's like a foreign, it's like this feeling is too foreign for you. So instead of trying to accept, of trying to forgive and let go, we want to tiptoe up the scale. So we might think, anger is a bad thing, but that's not true. Anger is better than shame. Anger is better than fear. Anger is better than apathy or guilt. In fact, anger is a very motivating emotion. So one way this might look is that if you're angry with somebody, you might want to move up to pride, which means realizing or thinking that, it's not your fault. You did nothing wrong. You only did exactly what you thought was right in the moment. And you couldn't have done anything else. Because if you could have, you would have. And you let go of that burden. Okay, it's not my fault. It's not my fault. And that frees up a bit of energy. Because resentment can easily turn into self-loathing, self-hate. And that will cause you to go lower and lower and lower. And then you step up to courage. What does that mean? It means, are you willing to live a better life? Forget the resentment. Forget the anger. Do you want to live a better life? Are you willing to allow that in? And if you say yes, congratulations, you made it to the next step. Then maybe go up to neutrality. And you can see you're beginning to let go of that burden, where you're no longer ruminating on that resentment. You're no longer allowing it to make you angry. Now, throughout the day and throughout the week, you might fluctuate. You might go from anger all the way up to neutrality, back to anger. But as you process the experience, as you process these thoughts and these emotions, ideally, you will find yourself in an upward trajectory. Even if on the short term you go up and down and up and down. And so, you might go to willingness. And that might be willing to try and look at it from the other person's perspective. How they were going through things, that they were suffering. And you see, as you grow higher and higher, you go closer to the truth. And as you go down and down, you go closer to illusion. Which means that, oh, wait a minute, that person couldn't have done anything different either. Because if they could have, they would have. They were doing the best with what they knew, even if we judge it as wrong or bad. And so you have a little bit more willingness to accept. And so you can more easily accept, well, I guess it wasn't really anybody's fault. And perhaps you go up to reason and you say, well, it was both my fault and their fault and nobody's fault. There were things that I could have done differently. There were things that they could have done differently. You communicate, you express yourself, you speak your truth, how you feel, and you get on the same page with that other person. Or if you're not able to make amends, you make amends with yourself. You reason that, okay, if I want to live a good life, I can't keep holding on to this resentment any longer. Because, well, what can I do about it? There's nothing to do. You can't change the past. You can only ruin your present moment and ruin your future. So logically speaking, resentment is futile. It doesn't make any sense. Only down here does resentment, okay, yes, it makes sense. Not only does it make sense down here, but it's encouraged because it makes you feel powerful. But as you go up here, resentment, oh, it doesn't, what is going on here? And so it begins to drop away naturally. And then you get love. Instead of taking things personally, instead of attacking the other person, instead of focusing on your own suffering, you focus on their suffering. Here is where you say, it's not me against you, it's you and me against the problem. When you approach a situation from love, only good things can happen, because love is the cure for all things. And by the time you get here, this is a toxic environment to resentment. It cannot survive. A different approach to this, one that I like very much. We all have potential, and that potential is infinite, which means there are an infinite array of different realities, all with different versions of you living different lives. Now, this doesn't have to be so philosophical, but think about it practically. In your imagination, could you visualize a version of you that is always suffering, that is always negative, that is always feeling bad? And can you visualize a version of you that is always feeling good, that is living your best life? This does not require belief. It is a fact that if you engaged in negative behavior, negative thoughts, if you started smoking meth randomly, you would go down and down and down until you found yourself in hell, suffering every single day of your life. And if you magically got your stuff together and started doing all the right things, all the good things, you would find yourself eventually in heaven. These are the different potentials that we have. It's a spectrum. And these so-called different realities are like timelines. This is called reality transurfing. And what this kind of means is that the mind is like the steering wheel on the sea of infinite potential. And we as a whole are the boat, the captain, all the different parts. But our mind is what is used to tune into these different potential realities. So for instance, if you are here in the hell reality, forgiveness is unnatural. It doesn't make any sense. You don't want it. But up here, forgiveness is natural. It's effortless. You don't have to try. So instead of trying to force yourself to do things in this lower timeline, you shift up to higher timelines in which you tune into a version of you in which forgiveness, letting go, acceptance, That is all natural. And so you can effortlessly let go of resentment. Because you see, the problem is that down here, you're living in illusion. And up here, you're living in truth. So what we need is clarity. Clarity is what allows you to realize that resentment is futile. And so one thing that we must understand is that everything is energy. And energy is frequency and vibration. I won't go too much into this now, but we are all operating on our own unique frequency. Every thought has a frequency. Every emotion, as we saw, has a frequency. And so your current life now is nothing more than the accumulation of your past thoughts, actions, emotions. And whatever frequency your overall vibration is in will determine the timeline that you shift to. So the question is, how do we raise our frequency so that we are no longer aligned with resentment, with these negative emotions that create so much suffering? Because if you're in heaven, you can't experience hell. The light and the darkness can't be in the same place at the same time. So too, you cannot experience negative emotions in a high vibration state. So the way that I am recommending approaching this situation, I like this word that Carl Jung used to use. It's called circumambulation. Big word. All it means is that you're kind of walking around the center of something. So the center is letting go of resentment, forgiveness. But instead of trying to attack it directly, we approach the situation indirectly from different angles by raising our frequency. And when we can raise our frequency, this happens by itself with no effort on our part. Our effort is first, we make the decision to live a better life. First things first, we have to start the day positive. Because if you start the day negative, that negativity festers out into the day. It snowballs, one problem after another. But if you start the day right, the positivity snowballs, and you can exponentially change your life very quickly, especially if you're in a deeply negative state. Because every positive thing you do is going to make big changes. The first thing I recommend, stay in bed for an extra 10 to 20 minutes. If you need to set an alarm 10 to 20 minutes earlier, just do it. Sit upright as if going into meditation. And the first thing you want to do is take 10 deep breaths. Make this into a habit. It's simple. 10 deep breaths isn't that hard. But you would be surprised the impact it can make. Now, I like the practice called Ho'oponopono, which is simply repeating these 4 affirmations. Let me tell you, this will destroy your resentment. If there's anything that you do this. Ho'oponopono is an ancient Hawaiian practice used to restore inner harmony, or restore harmony in the environment. If you have to be robotic at first, just do it. The point is that first thing in the morning, you take some deep breaths, and you begin repeating positive affirmations in your mind, and this will build positive momentum for the day. But if you just get out of bed and you're just, I hate my life, I hate my work, all this stuff I have to do, then of course you're going to live a bad life. You're going to stay stuck. So what I like to do is that when I breathe, I like to repeat these 4 affirmations. So on the in-breath, well, repeat it in your mind. I'm sorry. The out-breath, please forgive me. Thank you. I love you. Get in the habit of repeating these words. Because the mind can only focus on one thing at a time. So everything we focus on comes at a price. If you focus on what is wrong, you take your attention away from what is good, from what is right. And so, when you get in the habit of repeating these positive affirmations, you don't allow the negative thoughts to fester. Because what happens, it's not the person or whatever thing that happened to you. That is not what causes the resentment. It's your thoughts about it. Think about it. You go off and do your daily thing, and you're not thinking about the resentment. You're not thinking about how this person betrayed you. You're not thinking about how you were wronged. But the moment you remember it, the moment you think about it, is the moment the negative emotions begin rising again. So it is your thoughts that are causing the problem. And you can smother out those negative thoughts with positive affirmations. I mean, if there was ever a practice designed for dissolving resentment, it's this. Because what is the first word? I'm sorry. Please forgive me. That alone will destroy resentment. Then you say, thank you. Thank you for forgiving me. I love you. So you can say these things to yourself because you're forgiving yourself. You're loving yourself. You're thanking yourself. But you can also direct this toward the other person. Maybe you think about the other person. Maybe you hold a picture of them and you repeat the affirmations to the picture because it's not about them. You're the one holding the resentment toward that person. You're healing the resentment in yourself and creating harmony in the environment as a result. And what this will do is it will allow you to rise in frequency very quickly. Because what is this? Love, gratitude, two of the most powerful emotions. So get in the habit of repeating these positive affirmations, and it can also be anything. I like to wake up and say, what a beautiful day. Today is such a great day. Over and over again. And guess what? When I started doing this, I could see with my own eyes the impact it was making. You won't even imagine. You don't even know how this could change your life so quickly. And so the next thing I recommend, some form of exercise, moving the body, because all thoughts and emotions have physical effects on you. Thoughts are energy, emotions are energy, and energy needs a proper channel to flow. So when you exercise, you get the blood flowing, you get the oxygen flowing, and this allows for better energy circulation through your body. And the better the flow of energy, the higher frequency you can raise, because it is the energy blockages that are keeping you stuck. Those energy blockages that are conditioning, negative memory. And you see this practice right here, it's designed to cleanse you of negative memory. This right here is a path to enlightenment, a path to God, a path to heaven. Because when you repeat these affirmations, your mind becomes one focus toward positivity. And you begin letting go and cleansing all that mud, all that conditioning that is keeping you in hellish reality, that hellish timeline. And day by day, step by step, you do these small things and you rise higher and higher and higher. And resentment, that was just a thing of the past. You couldn't even imagine holding on to resentment anymore. So an added bonus, exercise. Go for a 10 to 15 minute walk or a jog. Powerful stuff. One of the most life-changing things is a 10 to 15 minute walk or jog in the morning. Simple. Another one, cold therapy. Taking a cold shower produces positive chemicals in the body that remain for a long time throughout the day. Now imagine stacking each of these positive things on top of each other. And then imagine doing it for a week, and then a month, and then 3 months. Do you realize how quickly your life could change? This video is not even about resentment anymore. It's about changing your entire life, that of which resentment is not even a thought. And then lastly, just watch what you eat, because all food has a frequency as well. So if you eat negative food, going down, man or woman. Life, big changes happen with a bunch of small things. And most of this is effortless. And think about it. If you don't like cold showers, if you don't like cold therapy, it's not that you don't. It's that the version of you who you are right now does not. So if you begin raising your frequencies in other ways, what I found to be true is that you naturally start doing things like this and it doesn't take any effort. But people think they have to force themselves. They have to try really hard. No, you just have to become a higher frequency version of you. And all of these behaviors become automatic. They become natural. But again, when you're in a low frequency state, you might not even be able to get out of bed in the morning because you're so depressed, because you hate your life so much. And some things, like going to the gym, just seem completely out of the question. And so you have to raise your frequency in these smaller ways first. Step by step, you take your power back. You reclaim your energy. And with more energy, you have more power. These are some simple ways, easy and practical, to change your life forever. And bonus, do it first thing in the morning, because the momentum will carry you throughout the day. And when you stack these kinds of positive days on top of each other, you will one day find yourself living your best life. Wow, this is so amazing. How did I get here? One day, one step at a time. So don't allow resentment, your strong attachments to this ego. Don't allow this thing to keep you from your dream life, because it is waiting for you. All you could ever desire, and more than you could have ever imagined. It's already yours. You just have to stop getting in the way. I am Ray. Visit my cool store. Much peace and many blessings, and remember, just be.